if they do, Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's the ranking member on House Judiciary, says this: with today's referral of Jack Smith to DOJ, Chairman Jordan and the Republican Congress have embarrassed themselves again. This referral, if ever brought before a judge, will get laughed out of court. Do you agree, George?
Yes. I mean, it's really absurd, as Ken just said. I mean, the English language is a great language, and it has lots of adjectives for lots of different things, more than a lot of languages do. But absurd doesn't even quite cut it. Preposterous doesn't quite cut it. There are not enough words. There isn't a good enough word to describe how ridiculous this is. He answered the question truthfully. The question was about search warrants. Literally, that was it. Said search warrants, and about the content of the records from the toll company, from the phone company. And this was a subpoena directed at somebody else. He did not subpoena. He did not issue a search warrant for the contents of these messages. He got them somewhere else, but that's not what the question was. And absolutely right. I mean, when you are prepping witnesses to answer questions at a deposition or in testimony, congressional testimony, you answer the question. Let them ask the next question. The testimony is clearer that way, and it's the questioner's job is to ask the questions they want the answers to. And they could have asked the question, well, how did you get the toll records? Did you have toll records? Not toll records. How did you get the content of and he would have absolutely said the truth, because there's no dispute about it. We already knew this, actually, that they had the content of these messages.
So I wonder, Joyce, is there a chance DOJ does not take this up?
Well, a normal DOJ would not take this up, Katie, for all of the reasons that Ken and George have identified. But of course, we no longer live in that world. We live in a world where DOJ responds to the president's demands. Last week, we heard Todd Blanche concede that during his confirmation hearing. And we've seen it reflected in other cases that we might identify as revenge docket cases, ranging from Jim Comey to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the immigrant who gets punished because he exposed the department's flawed due process procedures when it deported migrants. So no expectation that we'll see something normal, but there are guardrails in place. There is, for one thing, a grand jury. And of course, as George has said, there will be a federal judge if this case is ever indicted. There will be a trial jury that would have to find guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And the reality here is that Jack Smith is asked a question that's specifically about toll records he obtained. This is something federal prosecutors do all the time. You have a case, you try to get phone records to see what communications took place so you can identify who your witnesses are, who your potential defendants are. Nothing unusual. You never get the substance of conversations. So these were very much pro forma questions. And had they asked Jack Smith, did you make any effort to get other records? Did you go, for instance, to the National Archives? As Ken says, he was under oath. There's no reason to believe he wouldn't have answered truthfully. He was never answered that question, or was never asked that question that they're now complaining about his failure to answer.
I'll get to more on that in a moment, but I do just want to back up for 1 second and remind everybody why Jack Smith was getting these toll records in the first place. Scott, explain to us what he was looking for.
Well, there was a violent attack on the Capitol that was a component of his criminal case against Donald Trump. But the bigger component of Jack Smith's case was that there was an attempt, a conspiracy, he alleged, to put fake electors on the floor of the Congress on January 6, 2021. That was the real meat of the case. And they were members of Congress who were some component of the process. They weren't co-conspirators, but they were somehow in the continuum of events. So it's been important to Jack Smith to figure out who was corresponding with whom in the Capitol during the Capitol riot. There's your foundation. But these criminal referrals from Congress, these are like the empty calories of Congress. This is performative. It's like a glorified press release. Do we think the Department of Justice is unfamiliar with Jack Smith or what Jack Smith is saying publicly or Jack Smith's case initially? Not a whole lot of value to this referral short of the press release. I did talk to Benny Thompson, Katie, the former chairman of the House January 6th Select Committee. Benny Thompson made a criminal referral to the Department of Justice on President Trump, and it seemed to have worked. It led to the Jack Smith case. Benny Thompson says there's a difference. The Department of Justice was way behind investigating Trump election subversion in January 6th, and the House January 6th Select Committee had years of materials to share.
On the subject of empty calories, let's put up this full screen. This is Jim Jordan's track record referring things to the Justice Department. You'll see it on the screen. He's referred Jack Smith, John Brennan, Thomas Windom. John Brennan and Thomas Windom were taken up by DOJ. Jack Smith may be taken up by DOJ. Give me a little bit more on Jim Jordan's track record, what he's there to do in House Judiciary, Scott.
Well, he has potentially as few as 5 months left as House Judiciary Committee chairman if Democrats win the majority. And he has precious days left in Washington, D.C. before the midterm elections. Very little time to make noise here from his chair and with his gavel. Jim Jordan has been a surrogate of Trump's. We know that. But he's also been part of the investigations of so many Trump critics. You know, Jim Jordan's the one calling for testimony or calling for investigations into those who've criticized Trump. And to Joyce's point, Katie, that there's a grand jury and a trial jury firewall still to come. I've been in the courtroom for some of these cases. In the case of the sandwich guy, the dude who threw the sandwich at the federal agent, the jurors literally laughed during some of the testimony because the case was so bonkers before they acquitted. Those are powerful firewalls that await.
We'll see what happens. All right, let me, and I'll get back to the point you were making a moment ago, Joyce, regarding Jack Smith and whether he would be truthful. George, you were saying the same, and same with you, Ken. Here is Nicole interviewing Jack Smith on whether he expects to be indicted.
Do you expect to be indicted?
Listen, Donald Trump has made a bunch of statements.
He said he would indict you, yes.
I'll tell you, Nicole, I honestly do not spend a lot of time thinking about the things he says about me and his threats about me being targeted by the president. You get to find out who's who. I am not going to be intimidated. And there's no way in the world, if the thought was to go after me so that I wouldn't speak up about the corruption that's happening or speak up to defend these agents and prosecutors, that is a grave miscalculation.
Ken, I know we talked about this in the lead up to his testimony. The lawyers knew that there was potentially going to be, they were going to try to set a trap to get him to lie under oath. They knew that that was a risk. How buttoned up was Jack Smith prepared to be when he was testifying in Congress?
Well, that's what's so ridiculous about this idea that he lied under oath. I mean, just what you said. He knew going in that this was perilous territory, that he was at risk of any misstep, any misstatement could be twisted into a perjury or a lying to Congress charge. And that's what the Republicans are trying to do now. But it just doesn't pass the smell test because he answered the question that was asked truthfully. And, you know, if ultimately he is charged, Katie, everybody who talked about the grand juries and juries and firewalls, that's all true, but it's going to cost him a lot of money. He's going to have to deal with this federal investigation. It's going to cause turmoil in his life, even more than he has now, probably. He's been threatened and targeted by Donald Trump. And it's not how this country is supposed to work. And we're seeing this time and time again. The justice system weaponized against people on very specious and thin evidence, Katie.
Let me play Todd Blanche, asked whether he will consider investigating Jack Smith.
Question. As it relates to members and their staffs and senators, it's just the toll records as far as you remember. Smith, that is my recollection. Question. Did the records that you requested include the content of text messages? Smith, answer, no. Now, maybe there's some nuance I'm missing here, but it sounds a lot to me like this guy didn't tell the truth. Have you thought about investigating this guy for perjury?
We take testimony in front of this body very seriously, yes.
Good. Well, I think he absolutely should be investigated. I think he absolutely should be prosecuted.
George, he went to Yale Law School.
I did too, and I'm embarrassed that Josh Hawley went to law school where I went to law school. It's just, again, I mean, the lying is so endemic to these people. The corruption is so endemic. The use of the political and legal processes to persecute people is so deep. I mean, the idea that the Justice Department is going after people who tried to bring Donald Trump to justice, and that Trump is encouraging people, both Todd Blanche and people in Congress, to make these specious charges and to bring actual charges against Letitia James and James Comey. I mean, remember, we're so far beyond the legal and the constitutional and the decent and the honorable. I mean, remember Watergate. Watergate ended. It ended with the resignation of Richard Nixon, which came about because a tape was released to the public that had Richard Nixon just suggesting that the CIA discouraged the FBI from investigating something. It never really happened, but just the suggestion was enough for Republicans to go to the White House and say, you will lose in an impeachment trial. We are so many orders of magnitude beyond that at this point. And yet it keeps going on and on and on.
In 2016, when Bill Clinton got in a plane very briefly with, who was it at the time?
Loretta Lynch.
Loretta Lynch. And the hay that was made out of that, because Hillary Clinton was running and there was talk about there was collusion. Who knows what they were talking about. And you can't trust the Clintons. They're so corrupt. This, again, orders of magnitude different.